Yeah.
All right, we are now live streaming on YouTube. Welcome, everyone. It's Friday. This evening, we're on our way over to Orlando to kick off our session tomorrow at the training conference. It's their 45th annual Training Magazine conference, and we're doing a session on gamification, game-based learning, Clash of the Titans. That's what we're calling it. So we're going to do two days of game-based learning design and gamification design. So it'll be a blast over in Orlando. But to finish up the week strong here on Friday, I brought the best of the best today. So I am so honored and just delighted to welcome my friend and colleague, Carl Kopp, to our pre-conference micro session. So Carl, welcome.
Hi, Monica. I'm delighted to be here. So thanks for having me. Really
Hey,
appreciate
you got snow in Bloomsburg, or what's your weather like?
We have a little vestiges of where they plowed the snow, and there's kind of little piles. But today's supposed to be up in the upper 40s, low 50s. So
Wow,
very
almost balmy.
almost, yes, very unnormal weather conditions.
Yeah, that's good. So
Unusual.
Carl and I have, of course, our Kraza Pass for the past 10 years as we've explored gamification. Carl has just a great extensive background. And of course, he's in academia and has a school that he supports his students, just wildly supports his students. I've always been so impressed with how he wants to equip them, not just with the education, but with the skill development. So how can they gain their skills as they're going through their courses? But Carl has so much diversity in both his interaction with gamified game-based learning and also his instruction in it. So I've seen him do everything from fully immersive zombie apocalypse sales game, which was a blast, and then took that down to like a low-tech card game, which was also very dynamic. He just completed a course recording for LinkedIn Learning on L&D in the metaverse and branch scenarios. So let's pick a direction to get started, Carl. Which way shall we go? Low tech or high tech?
Right. Let's pick low for now.
Okay. All right. Good.
High tech.
All right. So talk with me about what attracts you to the low tech. Like if we're designing a game for learning, a serious game, game-based learning, what draws you to that low tech side?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's very interesting. So early in my career, I'm like, I've got to create like the epic, Call of Duty for learning type of game. So worked with a gentleman named Jim Kiggins, very talented developer, created a game called Zombie Sales Apocalypse, which was about sales. It was for pharma, so we had the whole doctor's office, we had the whole thing, and basically it was branching, and if you got the answer wrong, the person slowly became a zombie and would chase you. And so we ran into all kinds of technical obstacles, and they could all be overcome, but it was one after another, and people were saying, hey, my avatar just ran into the wall, my avatar is not doing this. So then somebody came to me and said, hey, we need to do a role play game, and it's going to be face to face, and what can you do? And I came up with a card game, and the card game just like wildly took off, and I kind of had an epiphany that, hey, not everybody plays video games. Unfortunately, I think they should, but they don't. But almost everyone has played a card game. And so one of the big complaints about games for learning is the big cognitive overhead, right? You have to figure out like how to move your character, what inventory means, what experience point. So with a card game, everybody knows the term shuffle. Shuffle the deck, everybody has deal, everybody understands what that means. Even if you haven't played a card game, and there's a few, you've watched somebody play a card game. So the cognitive overhead is dramatically reduced. And what that means is that people can focus on the learning elements. And people say, well, card game, Carl, that's really basic. Like what are you going to teach? But you can do really involved scenario-based learning, critical thinking, categorization of data. You can do prioritization with card games. You can do all kinds of things with those games. So I've really kind of embraced that, and I've done many different decks and even created. So then the other complaint is, well, that's great, but we're Zoom. How can you do card games? So I worked with a group and we've created something called Enterprise Game Stack, which is a digital card game. So you can do it, and Prezi has something, and there's a bunch of different places, not just that. There's a bunch of different places that can do that. So um, it's possible to digitally recreate the experience of a card game. And we've all played card games, and I'm sure you've done card games too, where the room kind of lights up, people get engaged, there's laughter, there's engagement, there's one-upsmanship. I mean, it's really changes the dynamics of a learning experience when you add that kind of interactivity and engagement. So I would encourage it. And the good thing is, there's like Print and Play, the Game Crafter. There's so many places where you can take your cards, if you have a good design and they give you a template, and you can have a professional looking deck in literally a few days. And we just did one for a large pharmaceutical firm. And like on Friday, we finally got the proof. You know how it is. Like, hey, I need
Right.
this by next Thursday, and Friday. Okay, these are finally approved, and we got it by Wednesday. In terms of the printing turnaround. So now you have to pay a little extra, but I mean, so you can go right to the. But the idea is you have lots of ability to create professional looking games and games that people can pick up right away. So they kind of
Yeah.
get excited about it.
The other thing I like about it is it brings it. I think like games like cards. Now, when I think about inclusion, I think it kind of levels the playing field. I don't have to be worried about technology. I don't have to be concerned whether I'm going to understand this. I can focus on the learning, because really, you can. Children of all ages play cards, so we can easily translate that into adulthood. And when you think about the ability to make cards, the other thing I love is that you can iterate. So we've had decks that we've designed, and as we've rolled it out and tried it out with different groups, we would find some things, we ought to change the colors of some of the backs of these cards, right? Like you can iterate because all you have to do is upload it again and print it again, right? It's just so easy to do. In fact, for our session tomorrow in Orlando, we designed and had printed professionally a deck of cards that we're going to use. So we're going to play a game to learn how to create a game, and we're using cards to do that. And it's just going to be that whole hands-on dynamic. And like you said, there's still branching choices, there's critical thinking, there's a whole lot of design components that are going to come into the use of cards in a live setting. So I love it. Yeah, we've used Miro to play cards online. And then I had a friend from England, Sarah LaFur, who referred me to Deckable. I've checked it because you can upload your cards there, and then other people can download them also. So it's a nice little application. What's the one that you created, Carl? I don't know it.
So it's called Enterprise Game Stack.
Okay, I'm going to have to check that out. That's very
Yeah.
good. Thank you. Very good. All
Yeah,
right.
and then the other day I just went and I got Avery business card template and just created cards there. So I mean, like you said, it's so easy to iterate and to experiment and then to play test and then get it printed. So yeah, it's a really good tool.
Excellent. All right, let's go the other direction.
Okay.
You just completed a course with LinkedIn Learning. I don't think it's live yet. Is it? I mean, you just
It is
recorded.
actually it literally just went live
Okay.
last week.
I wasn't sure if you had just got home from being in the studio or if you had gone. So it went live, and the course is called.
It's called Designing Learning Experiences in the Metaverse.
Okay. Well, what does that look like?
So it's very interesting. So a lot of people are rushing into the metaverse. Although I have to admit, I think Chat GPT has taken some of the air out of the metaverse, sucked some of the oxygen out. But basically, people were asking me like, well, how do you design for this kind of environment? How is it different than creating a course, or how is it different? What different affordances do you have? So the idea is way back when I wrote Learning in 3D with Tony O'Driscoll, and a lot of those same lessons have come fast forward maybe 15 years. if I did the math right there. So the idea is we talk about what kind of learning experiences you need to set up, what kind of design considerations. So for example, when you create a metaverse environment, it should be about 30% larger. Like everybody wants to copy everything. Oh, let's make a classroom in the metaverse.
Oh, yeah.
Right. If you do, it needs to be about 30% larger because people walking around their avatars and things like that. But I would argue that creating a classroom isn't the best thing to do. What you should do is like, let's say you're teaching, a foreign language. Well, put the person in the airport having to buy a ticket, or in a hotel room trying to book the hotel, or in a restaurant trying to order, like all of those things you can do. So if you're working for an insurance company, for example, send somebody to the scene of an accident and have them evaluate, was it a front end accident, a rear end, what was a collision, who was at fault, those kind of things. So I always say, think field trip, not classroom, when you develop in the metaverse, and think about coordination, because one of the great things about the metaverse is it's a collaborative environment. And so way back when, there was a use of the metaverse where folks who were first responders along highways, state highways, if there's an accident, the local law enforcement respond, local ambulances respond, and they don't actually always have experience working together. It's very expensive to bring in the fire trucks and the ambulance. So doing it virtually allowed them to work together, to team up, and to learn how to communicate with each other without having all the expenses of going to the same place and taking a couple of days off and things like that. So we really talked about that. We talked about developing the right learning outcomes, because a virtual world or a metaverse is basically an open environment. And so how do you stop? I used to coach AYSO soccer, right? And so you'd always have those couple of kids that were out picking daisies or looking for four-leaf clovers. You're like, the ball's coming. You got to.
Yeah. Picking up the ball and just running down the field with it.
So that it's not exactly the same, but it does transfer sometimes to adult learners. So they get distracted or whatever. So so we talk a little bit about how do you create kind of the scaffolding or the guidelines, the guide rails to get to where you want them from a learning perspective, without them feeling like it's didactic, oppressive instruction. So there's techniques like that we talk about. And then we talk about the best use of it. So the best use is not to teach like vocabulary and terminology and that kind of stuff. It's really problem solving, procedural learning, collaboration, coordination. So we talk about that and how that is the best learning in that type of environment. So I'm a big advocate of, and I know you are too, of picking the right instructional methodology for the right outcome. So, a Jeopardy game is not the right thing to teach problem solving. And, a murder mystery escape room is not best to teach vocabulary, right? So we need to pick and choose the right game design and the right gamification approach to the right learning outcomes. And so we talk about that a lot in that course, because I want to make sure that people we make the same mistake. So when motion film first came out, people literally set up the camera in front of a play and just filmed a play. Well, it kind of ruins the best part of a live theatrical production when you film it. But now we have things like, if the screen blurs, you're going back in time. If it swirls, you're moving to another location. So we developed a literacy among filming, and we're in the infancy stages of developing a literacy in the metaverse. So what does it mean when you teleport to a certain place, or what does it mean when you see this in the metaverse? So we need to more work on developing this language so that we're talking about the same learning outcomes that we talk about. And so the course talks about that as well. And it's a quick course, so not real long. When I first did my LinkedIn learning course, my gamification course was like 2.5 hours, and now they're like shorter.
Yeah.
But this is a big subject. It's the metaverse. Come on. So it's kind of funny, but so it's a quick course that anybody can quickly go through it. And the good thing about LinkedIn Learning is almost everybody has it. Your company has it, your local library has it, your school district has it, so you can watch it pretty much for free.
That's so exciting and just so great. It's just, I was thinking back about when you were just saying about, matching what you're trying to learn to the correct uh form of instruction. And I'm sorry because I don't have my bookshelf here because I'm not in my office, but your two books that your handbooks, what are they called? The first one's white, one's black.
Yeah.
That's how I know I'm on my shelf.
Right.
Right. So because
Yeah.
when I'm looking for them, I'm just looking colors, right? So
Right.
what was that book that you wrote, the first one that's
So the white one is gamification of learning and instruction, and that one is a little bit more academic. So because when I did that, everyone's going like, yeah, games don't work for learning. There's no research. There's no evidence, and I'm like, there's a ton of evidence. So that book is the evidence. And then I wrote the field book, and the field book is how do you do it at kind of a 20,000 foot level, right? So kind of looking at simulations, games, and gamification. And then Sharon Bowler and I wrote, so each of my books is becoming more and more like uh, uh, step by step. So the Play to Learn book,
yes,
the
which I
blue
actually
cover.
have with me on this
Ah,
trip. I threw it in
excellent.
my bag since I was like, this will be good to have. Yeah, so
That
I'm
was a fun
excited to
book
have
to
it
write.
with me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and that one's a recipe basically. Like
yeah,
here's what you need to do, step one, step two. I think it's 9 steps in that process. So each of the books gives a more and more of a narrow focus so that one thing that surprised me was um, you know, and it shouldn't have, but being as immersed in it as I was, I'm like, oh, all you need to do is this, this, and this, and people are like, well, wait a minute, what about this? And I'm like, oh, okay, and so that's kind of how Sharon and I put together that Play to Learn, which we kind of narrowly focused what you need to know about. But if you need to make a business case and a case for learning, the white book. If you have some experience, you're like, yeah, I think I know what to do. I just want a little guidance, then the black book. And then if you're like, hey, I've never done this. I mean, I've had people, and I'm sure you have too, come to your sessions, your game design sessions, and say, I've never played a game. And you're like, okay, this is a long road to hoe, right? To get up there. So, it can be done, but so that book is kind of to help people in that
yeah.
situation. I've even had somebody come to my session and go, I hate games.
I know. I was going to say, or they tell you they hate games.
Right,
I know,
exactly.
like, well, what? Let's talk about, is this a good fit?
Right.
Like,
We're not off to a good start here.
I hate games. I never play
Right.
games. Okay. All right.
Right. Well, welcome to the game workshop
Oh, yes.
where you'll
Let's
be
see.
playing and designing
Let's
games.
see if we can have some fun today. Yeah, that's
Right.
so good. All right. So I always enjoy talking. And, whenever Carl is at a conference that I'm at, I try and make sure I can schedule to get in his session because, it's one of those things that the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know nothing. Like, right. Like I just
I
keep
feel the
thinking,
same way. Yep.
and my niece would be so upset that Aunt Monica, your grammar, but I don't know nothing, right? Like I just think, oh my gosh, I just hadn't thought of it from that perspective. That's a total different approach. That's such an interesting way to address this situation. And so I just love learning and growing with you, Carl. You make the learning easy. Let me see how I say that. It's not easy, but you you simplify it so that people can grasp it and then have the courage to, okay, well, I'm going to step out here and I'm going to try this. This is what Carl said to do. I'm going to try what Carl said. And I love that. I really do. If I was one of those people that doesn't really like games, I don't really want to pay for my employees to learn how to play, but I heard about this Dr. Carl Kopp who has all this knowledge on gamified game-based learning. And I came to you and I was like, I'm thinking about doing this for our corporate training, HR compliance, and what do I need to know? What would be the one thing that you would want to tell that training manager or chief learning officer that you think is most important for them to understand, whether it's gamified, game-based learning, whichever way you want to take that?
Yeah, that's a great question. The very first thing I say to anyone is play some games because I liken it to a novel, right? If you want to write a novel or a book, you have to have a certain amount of literacy. You have to understand, how nouns and verbs work. You have to understand adjectives. You have to understand narrative, those types of things. And games are the same way, and gamification is the same way. There are certain game dynamics and game mechanics and all of those things that you have to know in order to craft a decent learning game. And if you've only ever played Monopoly, your learning game will look like Monopoly. And Monopoly is not the best game for lots of different things, right? And if you've only ever played Trivial Pursuit, then all of your games are going to be trivia based, which really isn't a problem solving approach. It's more of a understanding facts and figures. So playing games is really, really important. The second thing I'll say is to keep it simple. I think a lot of first time developers of learning games that I encounter, and even gamification, want to make like these complex scoring systems, or like let's teach them the entire sales process from start to finish. And I'm like, well, let's just start with opening a call. Why don't we start there? And then if we nail that, then we can go from there. So starting small is really important. And then the other, I know you asked me for one.
No, that's good.
The only other thing I would say is start. Like a lot of people, especially with games, I find, and I'm sure you find this too, is it's very analysis paralysis. Like I have to get the game right before I show it to anybody. That will take forever. You will never get it right. And even if you get it right and show it to people, it will be wrong. So you've got to get it in front of people as soon as you possibly can, because like you said, you get the feedback about the color. Oh, I never even thought about that. Or they say, well, how do I know who goes first? Oh, never even thought about that. Well, how do I, like all of those things that you have in your head or that you just assume are going to happen are not going to just happen unless you play test it. So play test, play test, play test. Get the idea cards. I mean, there's a really great story of there's a guy named Stone Lambreth who developed like games for EA and all that kind of stuff. And how he got started was he would make a game for his son every year, and it started out very basic. And then as the son got older, he had to make more and more complicated games. And finally, he had this game with this huge spreadsheet and all this stuff. And he said he got his job at EA when he showed them the spreadsheet. And they're like, oh my goodness, that's really like, but that was literally years of development. So start small, and eventually you can get up to a spreadsheet if you want. But the idea is simplicity, simplicity, simplicity. If you're confused, your learners and players are going to be confused. So that's kind of my little bit of getting started advice.
And I think that's one of the most challenging areas, like when you're designing the game, is to, like, I think about getting the direction. I don't have a card with me, but getting the directions down to fit on a card, right? Like if I can't get them down then it's too complicated. They've got to be able to read that and understand it. And I have a variety of what I call Monica Cornetti laws of the universe. Like they're not scientific based, but it's just what I've experienced that I believe that. And one of those is you'll learn more in 10 minutes of putting your game in somebody else's hands than you will poring over it on your own for 10 hours. Because as soon as you put it in someone's hands, they're going to say something like, exactly that. Well, had you considered, how do you do this? And you're like, well, of course they're going to ask that. Like it's so obvious that that's missing from the game, and you never saw it though, and they saw it right away. So we love to get it, like we call it low resolution paper, even, draw it on paper, put it in people's hands so that you can start getting that feedback. And you don't have, like, we have a theme of pirates in one of our courses, and some people say I don't really like pirates, and I'll say that's okay. Some people told you, can we do something other than zombies? Well, yes, and it changes the whole journey is zombies, right? So if we change it from but that's not the feedback that you're going to iterate with. That's just an opinion. Feedback that is actually going to improve the gameplay is what you'll use in your iterations. So
like this is confusing, or I don't know what to do next.
Yes, I don't. The gameplay's too slow. Like we're using one dice, we need to use two or six, right? And we need to change. Yeah, those kind of things. Very good, Carl. I knew this would be delightful. So thank you so much. I'm sorry that I haven't seen you in person.
I know.
Years.
Yeah.
Are you coming to training? Will you be in Orlando?
Unfortunately, no. I was just at Tech Knowledge, and so there's only so many conferences one can go.
I was surprised when I was seeing that was happening. I was like, wow, that wasn't even really on. I mean, it was on my radar, but I just didn't connect yeah, that it was just happening.
It
So
snuck up on me. I was like, oh, you're
yeah.
in New Orleans next week. I'm like, oh, maybe
Better
I should
make
get a flight.
plans.
Right.
I know. Maybe I better make some plans here.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Carl. I'm wishing you the very best with all your adventures. I love hearing and seeing what you're doing. And so I know we'll see each other again sometime soon, and
Absolutely.
appreciate you being here. And I hope that you can drop in sometime over the 48 hours. We'll be going February 26th through 28th. Jonathan will make sure you've got the access pass for it. And if you can
Excellent.
pop in at all over those 48 hours, I know people would love to talk with you.
Great. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Looking forward to it.